Time for the business news of the day. Brian Quinn is with us. He's starting in the Middle East. Iranian attacks on the oil facilities of neighbouring Gulf nations are creating new chaos for exports, Brian.
Well, Iranian attacks have targeted the United Arab Emirates port of Fujairah for the second day in a row, reportedly triggering a large fire at an oil facility there. Fujairah is one of the very few points of export for Gulf oil-producing nations that bypasses the Strait of Hormuz. It's the terminus for an Emirati oil pipeline that runs from Habshan. That's a port that lies before the key maritime choke point, now effectively closed by the threat of Iranian attacks. That pipeline typically handles around 1.5 million barrels per day, maxing out at 1.8 million of the UAE's 3.5 million daily total. Iran is well aware of the pipeline's value in allowing tankers to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia has its own bypass pipeline going from Abqaiq on the Persian Gulf to Yanbu on the Red Sea. A fleet of tankers has now gathered at Yanbu, waiting to load up on oil. Shipments from Yanbu have gone from 2.1 million barrels per day to 3.1 million over the past week. The head of the International Energy Agency, meanwhile, says the current war has created the largest oil supply disruption in the history of global markets. Here he is.
The volume of oil supply now offline is already higher than the supply loss during the oil shock of 1973 and higher than any of the big disruptions we have witnessed since then.
So what's the reaction then to all of that, Brian, from the markets?
Well, crude oil prices are once again, perhaps unsurprisingly, soaring amid mounting skepticism over the U.S.'s calls to assemble an international naval coalition to escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Brent crude back above $103 per barrel. American benchmark WTI up around 3.4% as it inches towards $97 a barrel. For the Asian stock indexes, a mixed picture on Tuesday. Korean tech and automobile firms like Samsung and Hyundai making big gains on news of new collaborations with U.S. AI chip-making giant NVIDIA. The Kospi and Seoul up around 1.6%. Chinese EV giants BYD and Geely, meanwhile, announcing similar tie-ups. Hong Kong staying barely north of the flatline. European markets having a muted open as investors' attention turns to a raft of interest rate policy decisions coming out of central banks this week. The U.S. Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, and the Bank of Japan all due to set new rates as rising oil prices threaten not just to rekindle high inflation, but also to weigh on growth. Earlier, France 24 spoke with GTC chief markets analyst Jamil Ahmad about the dilemma facing monetary policymakers amid the threat of global stagflation.
I think so far what we're seeing is the market is trying to absorb what is uncertainty and a potential short-term disruption. But should this disruption actually turn into a supply issue and then lean into the inflation outlook, starting to delay the interest rate cut outlook, then I think we're going to start to see some real, I would say, downward pressure on 2026 global growth projections throughout the world economy. And that's when central bankers are going to have a real issue at their hand.
So a complicated picture for those central banks as they go to set policy decisions this week, Stuart.
Brian, thanks very much. Brian Quinn with Business on France 24. Let's have